Welcome to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bag Podcast. Here's your hosts, Kyle Baker and Dieter Burrell. All right, welcome back to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bag Podcast. As always, it's Kyle and Dieter here. And today, we're going to kind of dive into a little bit of the technology side of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Dieter and I were talking a little bit earlier about some of the new softwares and new hardware and things like that are out there in the market. And so we thought that might be something great to bring to you guys and really let you get some input on it. So Dieter, you want to let us know what you've been looking at, man?
Yeah, first of all, guys, wanted to give everybody a big shout out. We've hit 500 downloads, and we're super excited. It's getting us all motivated to do more podcasts. So you guys keep in there and keep listening to us. Hopefully, we'll get better and better, and we'll bring in some guests and talk about some really interesting topics. Anyways, this past week has been interesting. We've been having a lot of technical issues with our computers, or I guess we use something called a Microsoft Surface, and Kyle's very familiar with it.
It's the Microsoft Surface book. And I guess we've been having little technical difficulties with this interface where it splits the laptop or the screen into two other screens, and sometimes it'll shut off and disappear and come back and reorganize all the icons. Anyways, you guys all know about just the technical issues that we all encounter when it comes to new technology, new software, and all the sorts. Since you guys been listening to our podcast, we do a lot of we do architecture. I'm an architect. Kyle's been practicing architecture for X number of years, and he knows the ins and outs. He does a lot of technical stuff that to try to keep us technologically advanced and moving in the office. He can tell you a little bit about the heartaches that he has to deal with. Yeah, so during the pandemic, we decided to move forward with getting everyone set up for a work from home setup. So we went from all desktop type computers to the Microsoft Surface. And by doing that, we also have to run through a docking station. So if anybody knows about that, in order to get multiple monitors, you have to have a docking station and those types of things. And one of the big problems that we've been running into that people have been complaining about is what'll happen, they'll be working and all of a sudden both of their screens will kind of go blank, and sometimes it'll rearrange their icons and things like that. So that can be a bit of a challenge, and that's really a hardware issue. Working with that docking station and things like that. But one of the things, Dieter, that I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit more was, the hardware matching up with the software and being able to be compatible with that software. And then also some of the new softwares that you've seen that are out on the market. Right now we're using Revit 2021, and it's been great, but we upgrade it every year. And so every year, the requirements get a little bit more beefed up. So the hardware kind of has to meet that. But what are some of the other programs that you've kind of looked at that you've noticed, are kind of really taking a toll on what we're doing?
We use an interesting app, and it's a plugin. It's called Enscape, and I'm going to call it a 3D visualization for dummies. It takes out the whole equation of pulling a model out of Revit and bringing it into another software, and then create either VR or three-dimensional images of the building. This one's all integrated into one package. It does, it pulls up a window, and then you're going right at it. It does have some, levers and, different features on it, so you can actually enhance the quality of it, the lighting, the texture, and everything else, which kind of pushes the video graphics on on our devices, and I think that creates a lot of heartache and headaches. We found out recently that software takes advantage of a video card technology. I guess that now is becoming very popular. Is RTX video graphic cards, which run faster and can handle higher graphics. Not to say that Revit's already intensive enough, pulling a lot of graphics into it. When we're looking at things in 3D, you can kind of feel the lag on the machines with the delay.
I got you. So that's you guys are working in Enscape a little bit for your rendering. I know I use a program called Lumion, and that allows me to do renderings, animations, really just bring the whole model into the software and be able to adjust everything that needs to be done in order to render and do animations. And that thing draws a ton of power out of the graphics card. So, one of the other things that's kind of come up is, some of the other programs that we've heard about through some of the new up-and-coming architects, things like, what's one of them? Rhino, Grasshopper. Have you heard of any other ones?
Maya is the one that I heard.
Maya.
I'm not familiar.
I think that's a rendering software, isn't it?
It could be, but it sounds like a lot of people are beginning to use it. I think a lot of people know in the industry SketchUp. SketchUp's very popular.
Yeah.
So it's very economical software, and I think a lot of architects are now using it to actually generate our construction documents. So, I think this is the next generation of modeling 3D buildings. What they call, I guess, BIM, building information modeling, which now you begins to put in data on objects and like case work and equipment, like the mechanical equipment, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures. And what I mean by plumbing fixtures is like toilets, sinks, drinking fountains. To some of the folks that are not familiar with that, it's such an intensive amount of information that you put into these programs that it really pushes the hardware to its limit, and that's sort of what we're kind of encountering is we have to end up having to upgrade, and we've talked a little bit about this when it comes to it. We're forced to upgrade every year to the newer version of Revit, and I think it pushes the hardware every time, because obviously Revit, Autodesk, they're always trying to push the edge and make the software work better and better. And you know a little more about how that operates when it comes to upgrading.
Yeah, one of the biggest strategies and also problems that we run into is, we're upgrading software all the time, but the hardware is not getting upgraded all the time. We can't replace everyone's computer every single year, even though we're replacing the software that changes the requirements on that hardware every year. And I don't want to get too technical onto anything. We want to do that on another show where we get really in depth on the technology and the technical side of everything as far as that's concerned. We can definitely do that. But one of the big things, I work in the IT department as well for our firm, and one of the big things that we see is where's the line between something's causing a problem and it's glitching and it's causing me not to be able to do my job versus this is just kind of a nuisance. It's not really hindering me from being able to do what I'm doing, but, I'd like it fixed if I can. Where's that line? I just had the other day, someone was telling me that, they were opening PDFs and it was taking forever. And I was like, okay, well, what's your definition of forever? And go over there and, it takes 15 seconds to open up a 40-page PDF. Well, that's not that big of a deal. But, if you're going in there and you're opening up a PDF or something, or trying to open up your computer even, I know that that's been a big issue in the past is you start up your computer and it takes you 20 minutes to start it up. That can be a big problem.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time that is being wasted in our business. Time is money, and what we sell is time. So 20 minutes getting wasted for something so simple as that, that needs to be addressed right away. But does you go to move a window or move a fixture in your Revit model, and it takes, 5 seconds for it to, and it kind of glitches along as you're moving. It's not one smooth motion across your screen. Is that big of an issue in your eyes?
When you're focused, and here's the critical thing, and I think everybody can relate to this. When you're focused, you don't want the machine to slow you down. You want it to be fluid. You want to be able to get from point A to point B and get the stuff done without having to wait for it. And I get it. There's times that I do wait for things. I know that when I open a window, I may have multiple little windows inside Revit that I have to wait to jump from one window to the next. I get that. But when you're moving a door and you're having to wait for the machine to catch up from you moving the door, or putting a new window in place and adjusting it, then that's when it becomes stressful. I think everybody can relate. A lot of the guys that do a lot of business software, Excel, Word document. There's a lot of those type of softwares. The moment it starts glitching, it is bloody heck. I mean, people get agitated and they're ready to slam that laptop against the wall and curse it to high heaven. I think.
So you're saying that it's really a big distraction more than just maybe a time suck as far as waiting. It just kind of distracts you from what you're doing and causes you to kind of have to take a second and regroup along the way.
Yeah, I think it becomes I think I heard the term, you being emotionally hijacked because you get so agitated at something that's supposed to be a simple modification to a drawing or a simple modification to some sort of elevation, that you get so hung up. Hey, I just want to move this door over to here, and if it freezes for that 10 seconds longer than you're used to, it drives people nuts. And that's why you when it comes down to it, if you think about it, you get people that get emotionally hijacked, they get agitated and upset, and all of a sudden they're saying this is a piece of junk hardware, there's something wrong with it, it's broken, it's not functioning correctly. And I think everybody can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll kind of play the devil's advocate on the other side of that coin. I have a lot of times where I go over to people's desks and they start telling me all of these problems that they're having and everything's running really slow. And, it's sometimes it's not necessarily the hardware, but how the hardware is being used. And I know that doesn't necessarily sit very well with some people whenever I try to tell them that, you're not using this tool correctly. You're trying to use a hammer to screw in a screw. It doesn't necessarily work. It can be done, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be without painful consequences, So, you go over to somebody's desk and they got, 4 versions of Revit open. They've got every file explorer open. They've got 13 different, Google Chrome and anything possible that can be open on their computer is open on their computer. And they're like, well, I'm not using that right now. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't necessarily understand that even though it's minimized on your screen, the system is still having to run that. And so it's sucking power and memory and hard drive space with all of those things open. And a lot of times if you'll just kind of close a couple things down and just work on one thing at a time, it'll help alleviate some of those problems. Now, some of that does not get fixed by just having a user issue. Like the screens turning off and things like that. Sometimes that is a hardware issue Or even in our case, what I've found is that the docking station actually has its own firmware that has to be flashed. And a lot of times that glitching problem is that the update hasn't been done to the firmware. And if I'll go through and I just flash their new firmware to the docking station, it'll fix a lot of those bugs and a lot of those problems. So I think making sure that you're staying up to date on all of your updates and things like that will definitely help. But let's talk to a little bit more on the new programs and new softwares, that maybe we want to try. I know one of the big things that you're kind of into is that VR. You mentioned it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
How do we use that? How do we use that to really give more value to a client?
And I think you're referring to Oculus. We started with the Oculus Rift, and then now we're testing out the Oculus Quest. We want to use that software to emerge. I think I'm saying the right term. The client into
immerse.
That's right. Into the space, so that we can kind of make them see and understand what the space is about. Because for a lot of architects out there, they use their imagination. We kind of been in the industry for such a long time. We can say something and we can visualize it in our head, but when the average person you're trying to convey an image or information to an average person, they need to see it. And we're trying to use this tool to help our clients see what we want them to see. And it's a fantastic tool for VR, and I think you guys, a virtual reality environments that we're trying to create by modeling these buildings and putting furniture in there, and color and texture and all that kind of stuff. I think the next generation will be, I think what they call AR, and that's like
the augmented reality.
Augmented reality, which now you begin to kind of put objects into your virtual, like into your space, making a scale model. You can have somebody hold the model, look at it, spin it, looking it around. And even in construction, I think a lot of the construction industry is looking at using AR. We're a little bit behind the time here in our region, but outside of our area, big metropolitan cities like Orlando, Atlanta, New York, I'm sure that they're using that technology even to its fullest.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on something that I want to talk about, Dieter, as far as, whenever you're talking to clients, and this isn't just in architecture, this can kind of go to any field, really. When you're talking to your clients, you want to make sure that you're using terms that they understand and expressing, what you're trying to tell them in a way that they can comprehend it and, absorb that information. You don't want to be using a ton of, industry standard jargon and things like that. We talk a lot in architecture, and it's very hard for people to understand. And like I said, that's for any realm of business or anything like that. Lawyers and things, they start throwing out all these big terms that no one understands, and that makes it very confusing and convoluted for their client. But one of the things that VR with the Oculus Rift is going to do for us is be able to talk to them while they're seeing in a virtual reality world what that's going to be. You and I as architects, we can kind of, we were taught and we were trained for a long time in order to be able to see something in 2D that's on paper and visualize it in our head how it will be in reality once it's built. That's what people pay us to do. It's not just putting lines on paper to get permitting. It's, being able to plan ahead and see how these things are going to interact with one another and what's this space going to be like once it's done. When you want to make changes is whenever it's on paper. You don't want to make changes out in the field.
Right. It's clear. I mean, I get it. It's difficult to convey that to a client, and hopefully one of these days we'll bring in an expert in construction and maybe a general contractor that is very familiar with how they take advantage of AR or VR in their world, because we've been seeing trends where they actually bring in the code official and they'll walk them through the space virtually
and they tell them this is where we're going to put the fire alarm devices, this is where we're going to put the exit signs, and they plaster it all over this virtual space. And the code official right there before the building's ever built, he's already telling them, nope, I don't want it there, I want it over here. And people are making decisions on the fly, and we're not seeing all the aspects that the construction industry is taking advantage of it. And I would love to bring in an expert one of these days. We'll have to reach out to a few folks to see if they can come in and do a podcast and maybe tell you guys a little bit about that.
Yeah, and if there's anybody out there listening to this that's in that field and you would like to come on as a guest, please reach out to us on Facebook, and get in contact with us. We'd love to have you on. But I think one of the other things that I wanted to get into today, Dieter, was where do you see, besides the AR, where do you see some of these programs going, like Revit or any of those types of programs that we're using, going in the future to really help us display more information in a better way for people to understand? I know one of the things that Revit's doing right now is they're doing like quantity takeoffs and things like that. You're using collision detection. I think has been being used with Navisworks.
Yeah, my experience having worked with the Department of Defense on a lot of their projects in the past has been we use BIM, and they have us develop a BIM implementation plan, which takes information that's on 2D and converts it into a 3D model, which has all this data, sizes of windows, even the R value of walls, the construction of the walls, construction of the roof, the slab, the concrete, the foundation, the structural engineering that goes into it, the mechanical systems, equipment. They list equipment, sizes, the sizes of ducts, piping, etc. We also run what they call exactly what you mentioned. It's like we run clash detection on a software called Navisworks. And again, it's not an easy just shove it in there and let the machine run it, because if you just let things run on their own, it would just light up like a Christmas tree. You have to be meticulous as to what you want the machine to run the test on. Do you want the ductwork to detect if it's having a clash detection with steel? Is it having a clash detection with certain size other size ducts that are clashing into each other? It helps pre-construction to go through this. There's the visual, there's the machine driven, and it helps coordinate potential conflicts. It's not going to pick up everything. I think everybody's a little bit confused. I think that the software is going to pick up everything, and it's going to spoon feed that information over to them before the building's put together. But it will make people aware that your structural condition in a certain location isn't going to allow for a 60 inch diameter duct to go through it. So they're going to have to figure out a different way to do it.
I gotcha.
So again, it's not a given. You still have to have some level of knowledge to be able to spot it, and then modeling it is very important. Especially if you don't do it correctly, you're only going to get good feedback if you put in the correct data.
Yeah, your output's only as good as your input, right? And you kind of talked about something just then about, you can't just click a button and let it do what it's going to do, right? Everybody thinks that there's just like an easy button that you can click and it'll all be done. We have that in rendering all the time. We have that with the clash detection. We have that with all of these types of things. People think that you just press a button and there it is, right? But there's no easy button. There's no easy button in architecture. There's no easy button in any business. There's no easy button in parenting. There's always different ways that things can be done, and everything's only as good as what you put into it. And I think you can agree with me, even on the parenting side, your kids are only as good as you are a parent to them. And it's never easy. Now, from the outside looking in, it might look easy, but realistically, you're putting in the hard work, you're putting in the time, and, you know, that's the only way that it's going to be good. And I know even in our office, you know, we do things for clients, and we do things for, you know, helping inside the office. You know, like if somebody comes and asks me for a rendering and they understand the process, they still don't understand everything that goes into it. So, you know, I don't understand everything that goes into, you know, starting a business from scratch. You know, in my mind, it's, here we go, we're going to click a button, start a website, boom, there it is. But anywhere that you do those types of things, it's not going to be easy. There's always going to be a lot of hard work that goes into it. Now, softwares and things like that are getting better at kind of trying to understand what you're trying to do before you're trying to do it, is one of the things that's kind of happening. You know, I was listening to a podcast the other day with Elon Musk, and, you know, he was talking about, you know, the Tesla and how it's kind of learning the behaviors of the people that are driving it. And so, you know, whenever you first jump in, it's programmed to, oh, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, he must be going to work. I'm going to set the navigation system to go to work, autopilot, you jump in and you go. Because it's learning these things. It's learning where you work, where your home is. So I think that some of these softwares are going to get better at trying to do that. And I think that's one of the things that Grasshopper kind of does, is it tries to, it doesn't learn necessarily, but it tries to understand what you're doing before you do it. Like, you start manipulating one thing and it understands, okay, he's trying to do a repetitive motion across this whole board, or you tell it, hey, I want to do a repetitive motion across this whole board. And as opposed to in older softwares where you'd have to model each individual piece, now it's saying, I'm going to do a huge array of all of these things that I've been told to do all at one time. So if you understand what you're doing, you can really speed up the process, but it's still only as smart as the data that you're putting into it.
Right, that's right. And again, you know, it's like we use such high intensive. What was that? We use such high intensive graphics software. Here's some other stuff that we use for video editing. You use it, Premiere. I mean, that helps. It helps put some of those animations that we do. We do full 3D animations for presentations. Photoshop. That's another.
Yeah, and even the drone work that we do.
Exactly. There's a lot of technology that we incorporate in architecture. You guys be surprised, you know. We do 3D printing. So there's all these different technologies that we're trying to get better and better at it. But, you know, it takes a lot of practice and dedication.
Yeah, and all of these things are meant to make it understandable to the client, to the end user. You know, when I walk into a presentation and I bring in a 3D printed model of what that space is going to look like, they can pick it up and hold it in their hand and kind of look through it and see how things are in scale. And that's really something that they can understand. They can understand that physical world, but they can't necessarily understand that imaginated world. You know, so, you know, being able to 3D print, being able to use the drone to go and fly these places. You know, I just went out to a project not too long ago, and it's just a big forest. We're gonna try to put a project on that site, and it's just a big forest. But whenever I can take the drone photography and then overlay some of these other technologies that we're using to render into that exact location, things start making sense. Things start making more and more sense to the client of how this is actually going to interact with the surrounding areas. And so the more technology that we get, the more technology that we put into our projects, I think the easier it will be to understand to the client, to the end user. You know, it's just, how much effort do you want to put into it in order to get that accomplished? Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about today, Dieter?
No, you know, it's like I don't know if for some of you guys that are listening out there, today's recording, it's a late one for us, so I think I'm gonna call it a night and let Kyle wrap it up for us with his daily his daily joke.
All right, so the joke of the day. What do you call two monkeys that share an Amazon account? Prime mates. Thanks for listening to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bag Podcast. Please subscribe on your favorite platform, and we will talk to you next time.